quiet down a little bit by resting the attention on the feeling of the breath moving through the body. Attention resting on the breath, moving through the body with the sense that everything else is just fading into the background. And letting the practice be really simple, breathing in, knowing, feeling, experiencing the in-breath, breathing out, knowing, experiencing, feeling the out-breath. Just that. And every time you notice that the attention has wandered from the breath, just beginning again, reconnecting with the flow of sensations from this breathing body. Letting all other experience fade into the background. Don't have to push anything away, but just not getting involved. Centering the attention on this sensation of breathing. You might notice the breath in the belly, the movement of the belly. You might notice the rise and fall of the chest. Or perhaps you feel air at the nose or the upper lip. It'll be helpful to be curious and interested about this phenomenon of breathing. Maybe noticing if the breath is shallow or deep, without any judgment. Maybe noticing again without judgment whether the breath feels coarse or fine. or connecting with the rhythm of your breathing. Or maybe the breathing is irregular. And anytime a thought creeps in, a plan, a scheme, a worry, whatever it might be, just releasing it into the ether and beginning again. This process of beginning again and again and again is the heart of mindfulness practice. For these moments of practice, there's nowhere to go, nothing you have to get or get rid of, no one you have to be or become. Just to be alive is enough. And we can stay connected to this aliveness with the very breath that keeps us alive. And anytime you notice the mind is engaged in some kind of project, just release it and beginning again. There's some experience, some sensation or emotion. It's not really staying in the background. You can invite it into the foreground. a moment to explore that experience. Well, imagine as if the breath were moving through this experience, this part of the body. Breath like a kind of inner massage, a kind of soothing energy. And always back to the simplicity of breathing in, knowing that you're breathing in, breathing out, knowing that you're breathing out. Steady, gentle effort. It's this devotion to beginning again. Builds the seeds of our resilience. Feeling the in-breath, feeling the out-breath. And then inviting you, if you wish, to reflect on someone or something for which you have a sense of gratitude. Visualizing this being or this circumstance in your mind's eye. If the person or an animal, maybe evoking the felt sense of being in their presence. And then connecting with gratitude as a feeling in the body. Noticing where gratitude resides, what it feels like. Even letting the inner smile of gratitude creep into the slightest outward expression, a half smile of the Buddha. And letting go of that, letting go of anything that feels like a practice or a doing, and just resting. Not picking anything up, not getting involved in anything, just resting. See if you can maintain this posture of attentiveness, of presence, as the sound of the bell guides the attention outward. Thank you for your practice. Feel free to move or adjust the body in any way that feels supportive. I've been kind of obsessing over this story that I might have told a couple weeks ago when I was here, but I'm going to tell it again. This woman was in Iceland on a holiday, and part of a tour group bus stopped at some scenic overlook, and she got off the bus and changed her clothes. And then when she came back, she was informed that a member of their party was missing. It's just described as an Asian woman. That was the only description. So they began a search party for this intense thing. They were calling in the Icelandic equivalent of the National Guard, helicopters were on their way, dogs were on their way. They were searching for this lost person deep into the night, when suddenly the woman who had changed her clothes realized they were looking for her. And she was the Asian woman that was missing, but because she had changed her clothes, no one recognized her. And the headline was, "Missing Woman Finds Herself in Iceland After Joining Her Own Search Party." And what I think the thing that tickles me so much about this story is, well, pretty much the whole thing. Like, it's a comedy of errors, probably language issues, something lost in translation. But it's so much like the sort of never-ending searching that happens in spiritual practice and being a human being in this realm. Mostly it's about searching for the right set of conditions. So much of life is adjusting the conditions, making things better, tending to things. We have to maintain things, otherwise they're subject to decay. We have to maintain more or less as best we can these bodies. We have to maintain our relationships. It's like a lot of effort spent to keep it all together. And that's incredibly useful. You might even say that that's kind of like the point of life, is that we have this series of problems that we get to resolve in some way. Someone was talking about, a teacher was talking about complaining to a friend about just the whack-a-mole nature of the problems that he had to solve in his life. That you solve one problem and then another one pops up, and then you solve this problem and another one pops up. And the wise friend said, when you play tennis, you don't object that the ball came to the other side. The whole point of tennis is that the ball comes back, and you have to solve the little problem of how am I going to get the ball. That's the whole point of tennis, but somehow it feels different when we're solving the problems of our life. And the energy of this, the problems we're solving, the things we're trying to improve, beautiful, noble things. We create art, we create beauty, we help people, whatever we're using our life energy for, no judgment on that. But the energy of that doing, of that becoming, of that creating, of that manifesting, is very hard to turn off. It's very difficult to just sit here and do nothing. There's so much energy that's sort of bound up, and so then it shows up in meditation, little complaints about, it's loud, or, it's not quite comfortable, or there's too much energy in the body, or not enough energy in the body. The practice reveals, when we come into some modicum of silence and turn the attention to it, practice reveals what's there, and we learn about ourselves. And it's said that self-introspection is seldom good news. So what do we notice when we turn the attention inward? Whatever we carry in day-to-day life, the stress, anxiety, the restlessness seems to be so pervasive in our society. I don't know anyone that's not feeling some sense of restlessness. So the inner life is difficult. It's quite hard. There's a rare group of people we have in this room that are willing to sit in silence and face the reality of the internal experience. And in fact, it's so painful that there's an experiment. I call the whole series of them do nothing experiments. And they put people in a room, they hook them up to an electrode, and they shock them. And they say they measure the intensity of the shock until it's at a point where the person says that they would pay money to not be shocked. So it's unpleasant, be willing to pay some amount of money to not be shocked. Then they put those same people in a room and they say something like, sit here and be alone with your thoughts for 15 minutes. And by the way, you're still hooked up to this machine, and you push this button, you'll get a shock. And 67% of the men, male identified people, shocked themselves. About 25% of the women. One person shocked himself 190 times, 15 minutes. Most of us, we don't shock ourselves, but what are the ways that the strategies we use to distract, to get absorbed in other things, binge watching Netflix or video games or doom strolling, whatever it is that we use to kind of distract from the reality of the inner world. And there's a way in which there's a kind of a payoff, like if I'm totally absorbed in a show or a video game or something like that, that there's a kind of concentration in the mind that happens. And at least for those moments, I'm not in my problem-solving mode. I'm not worried about other things that I might be worried about. I tend to be a little bit disconnected from unpleasant sensations in the body. So there's a payoff in that kind of, what we call distraction. But when you practice concentrating the mind through meditation, not only is the pleasure in that orders of magnitude higher, but there's some mysterious reorganization that happens in the system that's actually in some way addressing the root causes of that which troubles us. This has been my experience time and time again, my own experience and with other people. It's kind of ineffable, but there's some intelligence in this system, and when we create the right conditions, things happen. I certainly have had those kinds of experiences, sort of like dark night of the soul, going through something really difficult and then emerging with some kind of different perspective or renewed energy or vigor. But most of the fruits of my meditation practice, going on now 30 years, have been things that just kind of like aren't there anymore. Like I remember I did a 2-month retreat and I came home. I drove from Northern California to LA, and I just noticed at one moment, someone did a thing where they went across 5 lanes of traffic. It's really dangerous. And normally I'd have some, never really like a huge road rager, but I would have some reaction and judgment and kind of like shaking my fist. And then I just noticed it wasn't there. It was just gone. Where did it go? I don't know. So one of the things that, I'll tell another story. JFK was on what became Air Force One. He was the first president to have his own airplane, and his aide was telling a story that he was always complaining about the temperature. It's too cold, it's too hot, it's too cold. Mostly it's too cold on planes, and there's a reason for this. Like the crew is moving around, they're in a kitchen, they're cooking food. When it's cooler, people tend not to get motion sickness. People tend to go to sleep, so they don't bother the crew. There's a lot of reasons the crew wants to keep it cooler. But it's the president, and he's complaining about the temperature, so you got to do something. So they put a little box on his desk, and they said, here's the knob on maybe there was a couple of knobs or dials on the box, and you fiddle with these knobs to adjust the temperature. And so the president stopped complaining about the temperature, and he's seen quite often fiddling with the knobs. But the box actually wasn't connected to anything. And yet somehow the fiddling with the knobs created a sense of like he was solving the problem, that the complaint stopped. So how do we learn to not be constantly fiddling with the knobs, to rest, to sort of come home in a way where we can relax and take off our shoes and be truly comfortable, to feel like we belong, like there's no important deadline or project that has to happen, where the nervous system can actually calm down and the mind can get that sense of collectedness that's so peaceful and resourcing. And what are the things that get in the way of this ability to rest? So I'm going to talk about the five hindrances. How many of you know this list, the five hindrances? Okay, so people are nodding. Okay, good. So some review. So I'll just name them. The five hindrances. These happen in meditation, quite common actually, and in life. Like you can notice, once you have this map kind of in your head, you can notice how we can be prone to be hindered just in our interactions with other people or as we go through our daily life. And some of the same strategies are useful. So the hindrances are, drum roll, sense desire, wanting something pleasing to the senses, aversion, not wanting something. Aversion, sometimes it's called ill will, wanting something to go away. Restlessness, traditionally, the literal translation of the ancient words is restlessness and remorse. And it's sort of become restlessness and worry, which I think is kind of interesting because it tells you something about a culture when people are dealing with remorse and people are dealing with worry, very different kinds of things. The same flavor, but different kinds of things. So restlessness and worry, sloth and torpor, and doubt. And the ancient word for these hindrances is nivarana, which means to cover over. So these hindrances, they camouflage themselves. They appear and they hinder our ability to be present in this moment. They hinder our access to wisdom, and they hinder our access to some kind of peacefulness or equanimity. And one of the most helpful things I've ever done in my meditation practice is to vow to become familiar with these hindrances, to really know the experiences, to let them be teachers. So sensual desire, wanting something that is pleasing to the five senses, has this quality of hiding. It's like a strategy of dealing with whatever problem is presenting itself by thinking, well, if I just had that thing, then everything would be okay. That's the lie or the hidden view in the hindrance. There's a cartoon I really like, a woman sitting in meditation, and she says, today I will live in the moment, unless the moment is unpleasant, in which case that I will eat a cookie. It's that kind of sense of like, and we all do that. It's a natural tendency. Like, the moment is kind of boring or dull or something unpleasant. We soothe ourselves with satisfying some desire. When we pay close attention to the desire, there's often a kind of like longingness, or the wanting itself can actually be quite painful. We can become easily outward focused, focusing on the object of desire, and that kind of severs our internal connection. The practice invites us to go deeper, like what are the causes and conditions that are manifesting in this desire, like isolation or loneliness or grief, boredom, pain, whatever it might be. It's like, what are the causes and conditions of this longing, this desire? And then the meditation practice invites us to experience this hindrance and all of the hindrances as, well, a number of things. A story, there's usually a story in it. If I get this thing, whatever it might be, better job, better relationship, whatever it is we want, a better place to live. Kind of the overestimation of how satisfying that will be and how long it'll be satisfying for. So there's the story, the level of a story. Then there's the level of emotion. Is there like a constellation of sensations that we would recognize as an emotion that's kind of feeding this? And then most fruitful in the practice of meditation, we come to the felt sense experience of where's their tension, where's their holding, where's their bracing. It's the vibratory energy in the body. For some people, there can even be a sound or a color or a number. And shining the light of awareness on that felt sense experience is the beginning of that ineffable, mysterious process of reorganization that we don't even have to do. It kind of just flows through us. If you're obsessed with another person, this is a teaching that was given to monastics, traditionally in Buddhist history. So, they take a vow of celibacy. So, but I think all of us can be aware of, infatuations or desire for another person. And one of the tried and tested ways to work with that is to contemplate that the object of your desire is a collection of pus, bile, phlegm, urine, and mucus, which definitely kills the mood. Also helpful to reflect on, is this a desire that stimulates more desire? Like a potato chip or a fancy catalog, or social media, like you just keep the tendency to want to keep getting that little hit of whatever you get. So the Buddha used analogies to talk about the hindrances, like a body of water, and what happens to the body of water when the hindrance is present. And the hindrance of sense desire is like the lake is filled with a colorful dye. So all we're not seeing our reflection, or we're not seeing deep into the water, we're just seeing that object that's appealing. Then ill will, the flip side of that, a range of experiences, anger, rage, hatred, irritation, frustration, just a little bit of disliking. I often talk about complaining, like the mind that's complaining has the energy of hostility, wanting to push something away, wanting to get rid of that. And then again, that paradigm that's hidden there is that, we're sitting in meditation and we're feeling like discomfort in some part of the body. And then this energy arises, got to get rid of this thing. Like if only this thing would go away, then I could be peaceful. Only this tormenting thought could go away. If only that person in my life who's causing difficulty could be different. All these energies that, and it takes a lot of energy, actually. It's not an energy that's like fruitful to actually resolve the underlying thing. So we can contemplate what's the cost to this state of mind, how it affects your energy, how it affects the nervous system, how does it affect our relationships when we bring that energy to other people? And then what's the payoff? Like, do we get energy? Do we get a feeling of empowerment? Do we confuse anger with agency? Maybe people fear us and we get our way. And then for all of these hindrances, to really feel into the feeling tone, the aspects of pleasant and the aspects of unpleasant. And it's almost always a mix. There's some payoff in any kind of habit that keeps us grooved to the habit. But more often than not, if you kind of weigh the pros and the cons usually win. Aversion in particular is tricky because it's often multi-layered. And when I reflect deeply on my own streams of aversion or ill will or hatred, it almost always for me, what's beneath it is a kind of heartbreak. There's a kind of like, when I look at what humanity is doing and has done to each other, to the other creatures of the earth, it's just like it can manifest as a kind of rage, but really beneath that is like the heartbreak for like this delusion that has kind of driven so much of humanity's behavior, and the anger is energizing and sort of clouds the vision. But when I can be more vulnerable and more tender with grief can move through. So anger, the Buddha analogized to a lake that is boiling. So you can't see your reflection or deep into the water because of the bubbles of boiling. Sloth and torpor, this is one of my favorites. For a long time was a kind of go-to. So the mind gets foggy or dull. The body might be tired or sleepy. A heaviness, a lethargy. Sometimes it's called sinking mind. And it is kind of distinguished from ordinary tiredness because ordinary tiredness resolves when you get rest eventually. But sloth and torpor is more like a kind of psychological resistance, which manifests as not having enough energy, makes it hard to be present. Kind of a zoning out that maybe a self-protective mechanism, the world is really hard, so it's a kind of like a dissociative coping strategy, or there's some accumulation of difficult emotions that haven't been processed, and maybe it's too much for the system to kind of go through, so we just kind of zone out as a self-protective mechanism. The Buddha described this as a lake filled with algae. So you just can't even, you get in there and you imagine swimming through a lake that has so much algae in it. And the encouragement is to learn to tolerate the discomfort of all these hindrances. So to build our capacity to tolerate the unpleasantness of a mind that can't really quite focus or feels heavy or clouded. Again, to see this experience as a teacher. What is being revealed? What is it to be a human being having the experience of foggy mind? To develop a kind of intimacy with it. And quite often with all of these hindrances, they become multiple because we might get sloth and torpor and then we don't like it. So aversion comes in, we're just amping up the system with more and more of these hindrances instead of like calming things down. And we build this capacity every time we sit to meditate, every time we commit to drop the stream of thought and come back into the present moment. Because that stream of thought is alluring. We're giving up that, we're coming to what's present. When we sit through restlessness, that feeling of, so much restlessness, I just got to get up. And we forbear, it's like, okay, let me just be with this. Even if I'm just with this for a few moments, to surrender to kind of yield to allow it to be, to change our relationship with the unpleasant experience. Is a ground for a whole new way of being. restlessness and worry, restlessness and remorse or regret. This is, as I was saying before, I think this is the true pandemic of this era. I don't know anyone that doesn't have some sense of restlessness because we're in a field of restlessness. You know, the world is on fire. There's a lot of agitation in the public discourse. The people who are vying to capture our attention know that they can capture our attention by things that are inflammatory, things that are like worrying, you know, like this is how our neurology is set up. We notice threats, we notice danger, and they capture our attention. So there's all kinds of financial incentives that people have to keep us in this state of restlessness and worry. And it's not, you know, in a way, it's how could it be any other way? Like we have these sensitive human hearts that are by their nature designed to attune. We attune to the field we're in. So we get to feel what's happening in the field that we're in. I recently heard something I really liked. Someone said, don't be a thermometer, be a thermostat. So when we develop some stewardship over our own nervous system, then we can help other people regulate. You know, this happens in this room. Every time I'm here, or every time I'm in a meditation space, I can feel the nervous system's beginning to co-regulate. So the thing that keeps us out of balance moving through the world is also the thing that can help us be in balance. When we choose our friends wisely, we choose our environments wisely. I just did a 4-day training on somatic experiencing. This is a modality of addressing trauma. And the primary, it's quite complex, but the primary practice is that the practitioner gets the client into an activated state in a titrated way to help them complete a cycle of stress response. And so I'm in this, you know, it's like 10-hour a day thing for 4 days with mostly therapists that are taking this, but we're all practicing activating each other. So I just noticed that I'm in a field of people that are highly activated, and how that impacted me. You know, I'm not used to being in a room of people that are highly activated. I know 3 days ago it ended, and I can still feel the reverberation of that like level of activity. Really good to reflect on your life. How are you living your life, and what are the things in your life that cause restlessness? What activities are agitating? You know, what friends are agitating? What friends are calming? Do we spend our time jumping from thing to thing, you know, which creates a kind of anxious energy? I often share that I love superhero movies. Just love them. I love the hero's journey. I love, you know, the idea of someone having great power and using it for justice and to help mankind. It's probably why I was attracted to Buddhism, because it's the ultimate hero's journey of the Buddha, you know, forsaking wealth and power and for the sake of all mankind. But I have realized that if I watch a superhero movie in the evening, I don't sleep that well. I don't sleep that well, then I'm a little off kilter. They're agitating, you know, that's part of the appeal, excitement, you know, and they're louder and more dramatic and, you know, bigger and bigger and bigger. And so it's been a renunciation that I've made. Like I have a cheat. I say I can watch them during the day. So, which never really happens because I don't really watch TV during the day, but it's an out. If there's a movie that I feel like I really want to see, then I will see it in conditions that are less likely to lead to agitation, because I have a way to, like, you know, go for a walk or do yoga or have some way of like having that energy move through. Really good thing to investigate, you know. And when we have more mindfulness in our day-to-day life, we can be more tuned into, oh, this is agitating, you know, or this is relaxing, this is calming, you know, to develop a kind of stewardship of how we live our life. The Buddha described restlessness and worry as wind on the lake, agitating the lake so we can't see our reflection or we can't see deep into the water. And then the last hindrance is doubt. Doubt in the practice, doubt in ourselves, doubt that you're doing it right. You know, as I'm droning on, you're thinking I should have gone to the sound bath, would have been much more relaxing. And this is the most insidious of the hindrances because it leads us right out the door onto other things, giving up the difficulty, you know, the challenge of introspection, but also all the payoff of introspection. I teach a lot of retreats, and every retreat, there's people who decide they need to leave the retreat. You know, they're not captives, and people they can leave. But you know, I always have this aspiration that we talk to them and we support them in being there, because it's so fruitful and it's so rare that people have time to take a week or 10 days off, really disconnect and be in a supportive environment for cultivation. 99 times out of 100, what's carrying them out of the retreat is some doubt. They think nothing's happening, they think it's not working, they have some doubt in themselves. And so it can be helpful with doubt to have wise friends, to have guides and teachers who can reflect to you when doubt is present. And the Buddha talked about this. There's these stories of the Buddha after his awakening, where he would be visited by this being, sort of like ethereal being, subtle being, Mara, who is the kind of the incarnation of greed, hatred, and delusion. And Mara would taunt the Buddha. He would say, you know, you've got them fooled. They think you're some enlightened master. You don't know what you're talking about. And there's many versions of this story, and in all of them, the Buddha just says, I see you, Mara. And in the seeing of Mara, sometimes he vanishes, sometimes he slinks away dejected. And what I love about that is he doesn't have to, you don't have to kill Mara, you don't have to destroy him, you just have to see him, it, they, I don't know, Mara has a gender, for what they are, which is doubt. Or any of these hindrances can be like a kind of manifestation of Mara, and it's the seeing of the hindrance that we get free. Seeing what's being covered over, seeing what belief we've bought into. So the last thing I'll say, or two more things I'll say, is that there's a really nice acronym that comes from Gil Fronsdale to work with the hindrances. It's the acronym of RAFT. It's similar to RAIN. Some of you might be familiar with RAIN, but RAFT is recognize. So you recognize the hindrance that's present. And then A is allow. So you allow it to be, you know, not invoking the energy of aversion on top of whatever's there, but just allowing it to be just for that moment. It's not a capitulation indefinitely, but in this moment, can I be with the whatever's present? F, feel. Like just turning to that aspect of feel and all the meanings of that word to connect with. And then T is tease apart, what I talked about before. You can see there's a story, you can see there might be some emotion, and then you can see what's the most discrete manifestation in the body at the tactile, visceral level. And you know, I was talking about being at home, so maybe this is the raft that takes us home. And the last thing I want to say is that, you know, when we talk about meditation, when I support people in meditation, I often hear like words like, you know, struggle, challenge, difficulty. And I want to acknowledge the reality of that feeling. Like when we are struggling with something, it feels, I mean, the other day somebody said to me that they were so restless they felt like they were going to die. And I said, well, we haven't lost anyone yet, but I know that feeling of like, I'm going to die. It's real. Leonard Cohen says, I know the burden's heavy as you drag it through the night. The guru says it's empty, but it doesn't mean it's light. And at the same time, it's such a breakthrough to recognize that most of the time when we're struggling, we're hindered in some way, and that feeling is unpleasant. And the struggle is trying to get rid of the unpleasant feeling. And when we notice that that's at play, we just have to take the backward step, from being caught in and identified with that story, that emotion, to being aware that that emotion is appearing in the system. Shantideva says, where would there be leather enough to cover the whole world? With just the leather of my sandals, it is as if the whole world were covered. Likewise, I'm unable to restrain external phenomena, but I shall restrain my own mind, and then there is no need to restrain anything else. I overestimated the amount of things I could communicate and the amount of time I wanted to spend. So I will stop there and maybe just allow a minute for those words to settle and sink in.